Hello and welcome to GM Tips from San Antonio. Well, actually, San Antonio area. Uh, Hope everybody's having a great week. I hope everybody is really having some great gaming. I'm going to hit a topic that's going to be pretty interesting, and it's for the home brewers and for those who like to freelance, who want to get, well, let's say not those who know how to freelance, but those who are working to get in like I am to freelancing. And I think there's some tips there when it comes to writing material, and whether it's writing material for someone else or writing it for your own group or for your own campaign. And I think there's some real critical things when it comes to writing that are crucial for a writer to learn as they go and be successful. Otherwise, you're going to hit some brick walls that you really don't want to hit when you're trying to do this material. So tip number one, and I think this is very important, is determining the outline of what you're trying to write. The first thing you got to do, if somebody doesn't give you an outline to what they want you to write, and you are trying to write something either for someone else, which is totally freelance, that has no framework to it, or whether you're trying to write a campaign for your own players. The first thing you got to do is sit down and outline what you are trying to do. So you've got to look at your task. And I think that's the number one thing where people fall down, is they get all these great ideas percolating in your head. And we're creatives. Let's face it, we love to create. So we're going to have lots of ideas percolating in our heads. And the worst trap that a GM can fall into when writing material, or writing as a freelance, so this can go for either or, is to get trapped in the concepts. Because what happens is when you get bogged into the concepts of what all you want to do, and you're just percolating these ideas, you don't realize the time frame it takes to accomplish writing this type of material. And I mean that. So that's why it takes some GMs a year to write a campaign, because they do not realize the scope of what they are trying to accomplish. So you've got to set a scope of things. Okay, so number one, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to do a campaign? Are you trying to do a campaign adventure path, which has multiple modules in it or multiple sections to it? Or are you just trying to do a simple adventure module? Each one is different time frame. And I think one of the things you got to calculate is how long it does for so many pages. So think of it in terms of bytes. You've got to determine how many pages normally comprises an average module. And then what is involved in an average module. There are maps. There is background material. There is a purpose, a driving purpose for your players. There is XP and challenge ratings that you're trying to do, or advancement paths if you don't use XP. Where should the party be at each section, and what encounters are going to get you there? All this compiles into how many pages, and you've got to kind of get that outline to realize how long it takes. So let me give you some rule of thumbs. So you're trying to do a 30 some odd page module. They're between 30 and 40 pages. The normal time frame to write one of those from scratch, if you got concept ideas, just doing it on your own, no help involved, generally 3 on the good side if you've done it before, to 6 months time frame to do that. That is, if depending on whether you write yourself an outline. Now, so what does that mean? An outline is kind of a flow chart that shows you what your overall scope is you're trying to do. So that is your overall ideas coming to pass. So you have your scope. Sorry, my camera's doing some weird things with the light. Maybe I can get it to go this way. There we go. No, too bright. There we go. So this way. I'll move myself over. So there we go. Right in front of the light. That'll help. What you have to do is write out your overall theme that you're trying to get the party to go after. And then look at what are you trying to do. You're trying to do an intro section. You're trying to do the adventure itself. Then you have to do any appendices for like locations, NPCs and NPC stats, and any new monsters that you're trying to do. And again, you're going to have to figure out time frames. Some people can go ripping through things really quickly and have the time to do it. Other people have other jobs and priorities that are going along with it, and that adds time. So you have to determine time frames and set milestones for yourself. So that's the second thing. In whether it's an adventure path, a campaign, whatever you're trying to do. Now, imagine an adventure path much longer, because now you're talking material that's somewhere in the 60 to 70 per section, and it can be 1 to 6 sections that you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes more, sometimes less. How long will that take? Generally, with a full staff and multiple people and people to do artwork and everything else, you might get it done in about 7-8 months, maybe. Most likely, a year plus. So again, big bite. Then the campaign setting. Depends on how intricate you want to get on a campaign. So take a look at examples. Midgard, your Ninth World, all these different types of campaign settings. Some are a simple book that's 150 pages worth of material. Again, 36 months for 30, 40 pages. Imagine how many for something simple. Probably a year and a half. Something really intricate and deeply detailed, 2 years. And again, it depends on what kind of history you want to put, how in depth you want to go. It takes time, folks. And that's something that I think we don't do ahead of time, is calculate and set milestones. Now, if you set milestones, it might be able to go quicker, and that's the second part. You got to set milestones. What do you want to accomplish by what time? People of creative type hate that. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's my number one nemesis. I hate setting a schedule. It is my nature to hate that. Now, that said, I might hate it, but on the flip side, if I do it, it helps me out to really know what I'm trying to do. And I've learned that it is the best thing of my interest for me to do this, to sit down and write out a schedule for myself. I did it on a recent Kickstarter where I was doing a conversion from D&D 5e to Pathfinder. I set milestones and I held to those milestones. And what it did is it made me responsible. It made me not sit back and dink around, it made me set aside time, it made me think about it. And again, I'm trying to help someone out. So mind you, I'm doing freelance work for them. It is my obligation to put best foot forward and set those milestones. Otherwise, what I'm going to show myself is not very effective when it comes to doing such things. So you have to really do that. So again, setting milestones. Number 3, and again, this is dependent on whether you're doing something for yourself or something for someone else. If you're doing it for yourself, you don't have to have so much communication unless you have other people involved. But if you have other people involved that you are doing freelance material for, or helping out maybe on a home campaign, a homebrew campaign, or something else like that, you are obligated, and I hate using that word, but I want to set a tone for you guys on how important it is to communicate. The number one pitfall that freelancers, I hear, don't do is communicate. Communicate how you're doing weekly with the advancing along of the milestones that you're trying to accomplish. Communicate if you're struggling. Communicate if you've hit writer's blocks. Communicate if you're having good success and you're ahead of the schedule. Communicate. You can never go wrong communicating. And I know a lot of creatives are not always, you got an introvert and an extrovert. The extroverts communicate no problem. The introverts don't. They don't like to communicate. It means pushing them to something that's very tiresome, draining, but important. It is really important. sometimes communication will break a block. Sometimes you may be at an impasse. Sometimes you might be writing something and it's not what the outline of the person on the freelance side is wanting to accomplish. And you're going down this rabbit hole and you get so far in that if you would have communicated as you go and show your progress, they could have gone, whoa. I had that in my Kickstarter conversion here where I was working with the person and he said, oh, Rick. He communicated several things to me. Rick, I'm not a number cruncher. I don't like figuring out challenge ratings, how all this works, all these things. It's, numbers make my head just shut down. Um, so it was good to know he's not a numbers person. And so I have to take it then and explain it to him in non-numbers and just say, look, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go from A to B to C. A to B is this. B to C is this. So when I communicated with him, I found out that he wanted to have the characters at second level by the middle of the module. So I'm going through and looking at the rooms and saying, here's the midpoint. And then I look down and I say, and per his sections, here's the endpoint. The endpoint, he wants them to be third level. Okay, so how much is each CR? How much? So in my conversion, I put some CRs a little higher to match what he originally had in the D&D side with their hit points and everything else, but it threw the challenge rating out of whack in Pathfinder. So I had to limit it in. I had to reduce the hit dice. Even though the hit points I'm trying to keep the same, and I was able to, I have to bring the hit dice down and some of the abilities in order to get the CR back into line and make the experience points work together. And then I went through and I went and did a double check. So this goes with communication. I was able to communicate with him that I did the numbers, I cranked the numbers, it looks good, and here's what we have left to do. So now he can get his Kickstarter done, get a milestone to get it to print, get everything done. It helps that person to figure out what else they got to get done so they can communicate to the backers and say, hey, got this, got this, got this. It also helps him to calculate any services that he deems to pay me for per what we worked out. So clear communication is important when it comes to that. The next thing is, and it's really important in this aspect, is are you one part of that equation? It's different to do a conversion than it is to do a full write-up. So it might be good to take on challenges that in the beginning when you freelance are smaller challenges. So maybe you're writing a section of an adventure path, a section of a module. What you don't want to do is bite off more than you can chew. If you've never written a module before for anybody, don't sit down and say, give me a module. Doesn't work. Because here's what's going to happen. You don't know how to plan it. You don't know how to plan your time. You think you might, but you haven't. You haven't communicated before. Worst thing you could do is set yourself up for failure. Start small, work big. Same thing with writing your own material. Start small, work big. So, what do I mean by that? Instead of writing a whole module where you're trying to run people through, maybe write up some NPCs and their background stories and different things that go with them. Write an intro to the whole campaign that you want to be the intro. Maybe it's writing a very small module. Maybe you don't do 32 pages, maybe you do 10 pages. So it's a minor module. It's a minor offshoot. You have to start with bites. What I find is everybody starts out GMing and they don't want to do everybody else's material because it doesn't match the vision in my head. Sound familiar, GMs? It doesn't match the vision. Oh! Yeah. There's a reason for that. Because you have this marvelous vision in your head of what you want to do. So now, instead of doing something that would have helped you, i.e., run a campaign and a set campaign, get the feel for it, get the gist for it, find out how the maps are done, read someone else's material. Sometimes reading the other material, I know it doesn't match what the vision is in your head, okay? None of them ever do because someone else created it. And you're creative and you have your way you want to do it, by gosh. but you're a novice at it. And you're going to take on this enormous task of writing up your world and your countries and all these other things. And if you got a beginning party, it may be cool for them. If you got an experienced party, they're going, some of the stuff doesn't jive real good. So now you go from this GM who's learning or DM who's learning and starting to get good, this powerful woman GM, this powerful man GM who does these great stories and does these great things, to a and then you have a bad experience. Let me tell you, when I started out in Greyhawk, and I read Greyhawk and I learned Greyhawk, and I picked a country in Greyhawk, and I ran the characters in the country in Greyhawk. Then as I went along, I started expanding to where the characters went outside of it. And then we started with the Free City of Greyhawk. We worked our way out. Then the next iteration, when Faerun came along, did Faerun. Did a little more. Did a more broad campaign that would jump multiple places. Then I did my spin on Faerun. Modified some things. Modified the timeline. Made it more what I wanted to see. Then I did my own homebrew campaign. How many years in was it? 5, 6 years. Some of you go, oh my gosh, I can't wait that long. Look, it's a learning experience. When you start a new system, start with a campaign that was written. Most of the groups have gotten so good now in writing these already pre-made campaigns that they give you the option with their adventure pass and adventures to pick different countries and realms that may interest you. And they give you enough background story, and they give you enough of the framework and the history that you can take that and adapt it. And they leave a lot of holes for you so that you can adapt it and you can fall in love with the region. I promise you, if you start Pathfinder and you do the Inner Sea Golarion, you will find somewhere on Golarion you'll like. Some of you are going to say, well, no, Rick, I've run Pathfinder for years and I hate it. Bull crap. You haven't tried all the realms. If you had, you'd have found one you liked. Midgard, that's another option. Frog God Games, and they're one. Purple Swan, and they're one. There are so many different ones that have campaign settings. Pick one. Learn it. Do it. Why am I saying this? Because then when you start writing material, when you start to do some work of your own and do freelance work, you're familiar with what you're freelancing for. How can you write for Paizo? How can you write for Wizards if you haven't played in their campaign? Please tell me that. You don't know the cohesiveness they're trying to accomplish. You don't understand the realm you're trying to draw up the campaign in. You're going to stumble and stumble. If you want to do freelancing outside of a campaign setting, fine. Then find somebody who's doing a third-party book or a third-party core book and do it that way. That's great. But if you're trying to do campaign stuff and adventure module stuff and other stuff, do yourself a favor. And when you're helping somebody with that, get familiar with it. I read the background of the person who I'm kickstarting of their thing. I even played the module through before as a play tester. So I knew kind of the core story of what he wanted to do. But I still asked anyways, as if I didn't know. But I kind of had some things in my head of what he was trying to do. And that's important. You have to understand what you're writing for. You really do. You do yourself a disservice to not try someone else's stuff. And I get it. Some of you have your own perfect vision and the others don't match up. I get that. There'll be time for you to write your own. But take the time to try someone else's and really immerse and give it a chance and see. Because I walked in, I loved Faerun, and I walked into Golarion and Pathfinder and I went, wow. I was like looking at a kid in a candy store. Am I a Faerun fan or am I a Golarion fan? Golarion. Golarion in my mind blows any of them away with the exception of Midgard. Now, I didn't come across Midgard till later. And I gotta say, tied. I love them both. They both got their pluses. Please do yourself that favor. Please, please, please. Take the time to read somebody else's. before you do your own. It will come across so much better. And I know, it's going to tempt you reading, and if you don't like reading, I'm sorry. That's part of gaming. You're going to have to get to want to like it or gut through it to do it, because otherwise you're not going to be able to write if you don't read it. I know there's challenges, and I don't want to belittle anyone's challenges or things that come across them. I know people have pet peeves. So, going back to things, timeline. Set goals for how big you want to do something and what time it's going to take. Have an idea of what it's going to take you to get there. Set milestones in it to help you to arrive to that goal. Communicate, 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 communicate. Also, read others' material and know what they want to accomplish. Take on smaller tasks before the larger ones. Have the little successes to build under you with what you're doing in your home brewing. I say all these things because, again, if you just throw yourself into a pool and try to swim, you guys know how hard that is. Learning to GM is like somebody picking you up and tossing you in the deep end, okay? And you're going, oh my beep. And you're freaking out and you're flailing and you're hoping that you can get to swim. And maybe you do. Maybe you dog paddle the shore well enough that people are clapping at the end of it. But see, if you took the paddle board and you learned with the paddle board and the crutches given you, then all of a sudden you get a confidence to you. And then you start doing the paddle board and going longer. And then after a while, you start doing things without the paddle board. And then you start doing things on your own and you start learning different strokes. And then after a while, you start doing more and you start racing through things and competing. And then you reach your goal. Little steps, folks. It really is. And these are just some thoughts for doing homebrew stuff. It's going to take about 23 minutes. Sorry, I went a minute longer than my longer ones. But I think it's really important to understand these things. Had I understood these in the beginning, it would have helped me a lot more. And I hope it does help you. And if you got questions, again, you know how to get a hold of me. It's ricmoh45@gmail.com. Or you can shoot me a thing on Rick M with capital R, capital M, capital T and then GM. And no K in Rick, by the way. Thanks again, folks. Have a great week of gaming, and I hope you have many wonderful creative ideas.